Guy right here is always a pleasure to have on the show.
Knows everything.
Yes, he knows everything, and he's the richest man in the world. He even went to a girls' game the other day of some small schools like North Love, like I go to once in a while. Yeah. I love Jack Gleason. Jack Gleason's with us from hsbball.com. Hey, Jack, how you doing?
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Matt.
Jack, you went to that game.
I don't even know everything here.
Okay. Jack, you went to that game the other night, and I gave you a little grief on that. I wasn't giving you a hard time. I go to North Love games, which are in the kind of the same situation. They're not IHSA teams. Right. If you're like me, I love going to those games. Those guys have the true spirit of high school sports and basketball, and they treat you good. It's just fun to do them, isn't it?
It is. It's so much fun, and I try to do that once a year. I thought about that when you sent me that message. I kind of laughed in the parking lot when I saw it, and I'm thinking, yeah, he's gone to North Love games or Marian Baptist. Mm-hmm. He knows exactly where I was at. And it's funny, the last couple of years, the game I've actually gone to is the Schaumburg Christian game. Mm-hmm. But now, when I looked at their schedule earlier to see when they were going to play a week or two before the season started, I noticed their schedule, and I was suspicious about, they must have joined the IHSA.
Which they did.
You guys were talking about it back some shows ago, probably being a Northeastern Conference member at one time. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at their schedule, they sure have a lot of those teams on there.
I think they're going to be one. It's just one of those things. You know how it is, Jack. You don't ask them because nobody will tell you the truth unless it's off the air or something, So, you know me, I'm suspicious of everybody, Jack.
I realize that.
Well, basketball's kicking off here. We're going to have tournaments going all over the state. So what are some of the tournaments that people need to look out for here?
I thought Emily obviously did a nice job talking about the Rockford tournament. I think that's a neat tournament. Obviously, don't know a lot about some of those out-of-state schools, but Auburn's going to be good again, and you've got Larkin there, so that'll be a fun one. Here in the Chicago area, just a handful of tournaments that have 2 or 3 potentially ranked teams as these rankings come out. Riverside Brookfield should be pretty strong this year. You've got both Oak Park and Riverside Brookfield, and RB will probably be a top 5 team in most rankings. The DePaul Wayne tournament that they play, it's called the Battle of the Bridge. Those 2 schools are about a block apart on Addison, Wayne and DePaul, and that tournament has both Notre Dame and Evanston in it, and those 2 teams will probably both be top 10 teams. St. Charles East is always good. The Naperville North tournament, Oswego tournament's good. Joliet West, Loyola New Trier. So there's a number of tournaments that should have a couple ranked teams playing each other somewhere along the way. So many of these tournaments are pool played now, which when they first started doing it, I didn't like that. I liked the bracket play a lot more. But now that I've gotten used to them, they are fun. It just messes up the matchup sometimes when you get down to the finals. So, but the first week's always interesting. I think you start to see teams real quickly. You can figure out, which teams are make-believe and which teams are maybe better than we thought they were going to be.
I like that, make-believe. That's good, Jack.
You hear, again, we've talked before, I don't do a lot of summer basketball, so I remember what happened towards the end of last year, and I see all these teams morphing into something that I'm thinking, I don't think that all adds up to me. And then a lot of times that's what happens. So you guys had asked me a question last summer when we talked about, Dave, you said, give me a team. Give me some team that you've never heard of or comes out of the woodwork next year. And I kind of didn't have a good answer at the time, more so than I need to watch a week of basketball. But here's 2 teams that are really under the radar. One of them, quasi in your area, is DeKalb. Mm-hmm. And, last year they were 22-8. Mm-hmm. They've got a handful of players coming back. The coach there, El Biancalano, is one of the top coaches in the state. Mm-hmm. And I just have always subscribed to the theory that coaching is so important that I use the statement that some coaches can walk into the 10-20 gym class and pull 5 kids out and go win 17 games with them. And this is the kind of guy he is. And every place he's been, he's been at, as I look at his track record, I believe he was at Downers North, and then he went over to Stagg, and he went over to York before he went the college route and then came back to DeKalb. But he's taken programs that never win. I mean, Stagg never won any games. And he takes them, deep into the state tournament one year. So he's just a really good coach. I think DeKalb's going to be really good this year. And then the other team that is really under the radar is Downers Grove North, and they haven't had a decent team probably since Biancalano was there in the 90s sometime. And I have a friend who sees as many games as I do and also watches sophomore games and told me that was the best sophomore team he saw last year. So that's a team that won't be in the rankings, but I think they were 17-12 last year, have a chance. But there's two teams to keep on your radar and see what happens.
You know, I'm always a stickler about transfers, especially in the Chicago area thing. But this year, high school basketball has taken a new twist. Prep schools from out of state have taken away a lot of the great players, especially in the Chicago suburb areas. So that changes a little bit how we see some of these schools in the suburbs that we're probably predict to be winners, and also who's going to be the best high school basketball players in the state of Illinois.
Right. And you and I have talked about this before. You know, that really bothers me a lot. I realize that in many cases this is good for the player, but it sure hurts watching some of these teams, and it does change the landscape of the teams. I just noticed this week that, for example, East St. Louis, where they have an outstanding, probably the top player, junior player, Tillman, who's going to La Lumiere in LaPorte, was supposed to play in one of the shootouts here in Chicago, one of the shootouts that Kaplan runs, and they've switched the game. It was going to be St. Joe's against East St. Louis, and now Joe's is going to play Morgan Park, which appeals to me a lot more. But you've had that case where he's gone, and we talked about Joey St. Pierre from Richmond Burton. You had Alonzo Verge from Willowbrook that went down to Florida. So yeah, you've lost some really strong players this year, and that, you know, that's just, it doesn't make it as much fun.
Oh, Jack, come on.
Plenty of teams and plenty of games. I think I used the example with college basketball, the doomsday scenario when the NBA started pulling all these players out after a year. Oh, college basketball gold. Well, it's just as exciting as it always was.
Right.
So it'll be the same in high school.
Yeah, I was going to say in high school, you know, great players obviously graduate and move on, you know, and things keep on ticking. Who's going to fill the Jalen Brunson void this year? I think last year that was overwhelming. What the story was last year was just him and that team and everything that they did. Who's going to kind of fill that void this year?
Nobody. I think this is the year. The theme for this year, as I try to think, talking to you guys, the theme is parity. And it's a parity from a team standpoint. You don't have the super team like Stevenson was last year, Simeon to some extent, or the past couple years where you had Simeon and Stevenson and Whitney Young. And then parity from a player standpoint. We've been really spoiled when you look back. All you need to do is turn on an NBA game right now and see our superstar high school players playing in these games. Okafor on Philadelphia, Parker on Milwaukee when he plays. We don't have that right now. And it appears Brunson's gotten off to a good start in college, and maybe he's heading in that direction as well. But I don't see any super players this year. They talk about the senior class being a real weak class, and we'll see if somebody comes out. Right now it seems like Charlie Moore at Morgan Park is, you know, kind of the leader starting out, but everybody else is pretty balanced. And Dave mentioned, you know, I kind of wrote down two other subplots, the transfer issue. And while I'm not sure off the top of my head I can think of any high-profile transfers that will affect teams, although there were a couple out-of-states into the public league. I'm curious to see those kids play. When you read the previews, Michael Bryan's Twitter reports, he's been putting on Twitter, a couple other different sources I've read, every school has transfer as mentioned.
That's a shock, Jack. That just shocks me, you know.
I realize some of these kids are the 9th or 10th guys on the team, but I just laugh, and I'm thinking about you, Dave, but probably the economy's better, and a lot of people are just moving to different residences, is what's going on.
I'll tell you a good one. When we do our previews, we have one on DeKalb on our site now talking about their program, but I got one from the Byron coach, and it said on there that Oregon, you know, Oregon high schools in the big northern west, they have a transfer kid, or not a transfer, they have a foreign exchange kid from Germany that transferred in. He said he's probably going to be the best kid in our conference, and that's saying a lot in the big northern conference.
Right.
So sometimes you just have to go to the games and find out yourself, don't you, Jack?
Right, who's actually on the team.
Yeah, that's right.
where they're from. Pick up the roster and compare with last year. I loved your preview stories. I didn't have time to read them, but I did notice you had rosters in there.
Yeah.
And I'm really big on rosters, going to games with rosters, because it really bothers me when I show up at a game and there's no roster.
I did that for you, Jack.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think, too, the other underlying theme I see here, that when I read these things, a lot of comments about freshmen this year playing. So it'll be curious to see, who knows what these kids are really like. But there sure are a lot of names being bantered around that are going to be varsity players, and we'll see what happens.
We've seen it a lot at a high level. Some of these kids, as freshmen and sophomores, that compete and do well, and continue it as they go through senior. Do you think maybe that is just maybe a trend now, that if you've got a good player in your program, you just have to kind of get to them a little bit earlier now?
Probably the kids, because of their options to go to schools, they probably do feel a little bit more pressure to play them. I just feel so many times that some of these very heralded eighth grade players and even freshmen have just matured earlier, and so they're kind of the syndrome of a man playing with boys, and then as the other kids mature, they catch up with them and then pass them. I can think of a couple, really good examples. Michael Shaw, who went to De La Salle, and then he ended up at Bradley. I don't recall where he started out. He was a phenomenal player as a freshman, and I had heard all these stories about him as a 7th and 8th grader. Well, he was just physically mature. He was like a man. It was like your dad playing basketball with you in the driveway, but he never matured any beyond there, and he just never got any better and really flamed out, for lack of a better term. So that's what happens. You've got Christian Negrin coming to
Rockford
to the tournament in Larkin. I'm really curious to see how he does this year. I hope he's not one of those kids. He was phenomenal as a freshman for that age. I didn't see a lot of improvement last year, and I hear he's played better this summer, but I don't recall him being able to, really go outside to shoot. His intensity level, he was not overly aggressive to me. He has a good intensity level. He's trying the whole time. So is he going to be one of these kids that is going to blossom here, or is he going to be one of those kids that was just physically bigger than everybody else?
One thing that Chicago public schools and some of the schools that get these transfer kids are going to have to work on before we let you go, Jack, is some of them had trouble getting qualified to play their freshman year with the new rules in the NCAA. The kid from Morgan Park that came, Lovett, I think was from.
Right. Well,
I don't know how that is. They're talking about a lawsuit, but there was another kid from Chicago. That's going to be a concern now for people, isn't it?
Well, it is. Pimpkins going to Massachusetts from Bogan was the other player. It is, but the reality is the public league has had trouble from a player standpoint with these kids. And for the most part, if you look at the successful public league players, they've gone the junior college route, and that's been able to get them then into the major universities. So, and there's some talk about their standards going up in the Chicago public schools in terms of eligibility. So, yeah, that's an issue. It is an issue. So, but on a positive side, from the public league, Phillips playing football today. From where all I hear, those kids are magnificent, are really good kids, and are really excited. So that'll be an interesting game today. I heard you guys talking about that. Gateway does have turf. It's AstroTurf.
Good. And I just saw some Twitter come across from IHSA. There may be some cancellations today of some of the games scheduled in our area, so we'll have to keep an eye on that too. So.
Okay.
Hey, Jack, thanks so much for coming on. You're always welcome to come on. We enjoy every time I get a little note from you. I always get a little chuckle, and we will be talking to you throughout the season, okay, bud?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys do a fabulous job. As I said, I actually listen.
That a boy. My wife does it, so at least you're on family almost, okay, Jack?
Yeah, you did a great job last week going solo. That would have been scary to me.
There you go. Hey, thanks so much, Jack.
Take care.
We've been talking to Jack Gleason from hsbball.com.
Oh, he does a great job.
And he's just so calm and cool and looks at all the sites.